So we also have the ability to update a document, same sort of thing, except in this case we have the first parameter, which is the searching value. So in this case we're searching where a beer has a name of Sleeman Cream Ale, and then we are setting its value of on sale to false. If it doesn't have a on sale value, it will just obviously insert it. And if for some reason it's a value that is not false, it will just set it to that. We also have the ability to give it an option of multi-true. In this case, just using update will only update the first document that it ends up finding in our collection, whereas we can set multi to true to being able to update multiple. Lastly, for deleting, we have the ability to remove documents from our collection. Same sort of thing with a name of Steam Whistle. And same thing as updating, we also have the ability to specify how many we want to remove. By default, it will just, I believe, just remove the first one, which would make sense to match our update function. But don't always assume something like that, because if for some reason it were to ever change, obviously your code will not work, or it will just work more efficiently. It'll delete more data than you were expecting. So it's always a good idea to always specify how many values you want to remove, whether it be one or all of them. So for working with MongoDB inside of Node, we end up using something called Mongoose, which is a library that you can find on NPM. It's open source, and it's pretty much the go-to package that people will use when working with MongoDB. So Mongoose, unlike as specified before with ORMs, is an ODM. So it's an object document mapper, which, I mean, you might be asking, Chris, we just were talking about why ORMs are a pain in the ass, because, when you change the schema of a table, you have to update the model. What's the point in modeling our document? Yeah, good question. I mean, it has the flexibility to do whatever you want, but again, as programmers, we like predictability. We like to being able to know that there's a name, and also it gives us the ability to do validation before we end up inserting something. So if we wanted to, we could say, in this case for a cat that we've modeled, we can say that that name is always required no matter what. Everything else is optional, but we always want to make sure that we at least have a name for a cat. So in the words of the Mongoose team, Mongoose provides a straightforward schema-based solution to model your application data. It includes built-in typecasting, validation, query building, business logic hooks, more out of the box, which for some of you might not necessarily understand what that says, or probably all of you. But basically, Mongoose comes with a lot of stuff out of the box, a lot of tools that you're going to be using as a developer to make your lives easier. If we have to keep doing the same thing over and over again, we're either going to find something else to work with, or we are going to create our own tools, which is kind of what Mongoose is. It's probably a product that people use because they wanted to make their lives easier as developers, open sourced it so that way people can use it. So actually working with Mongoose, we just required it into our application like we do other modules that we've used before, like Express. We will connect to our Mongoose server. This is an example of how to connect to a local server that you have. And then we can, in this case, we create a model called cat, and it has a value of name, which is a string. And then we can create a new cat, given a name, and then we can save it. So the one thing that's a little bit different as opposed to working with a SQL database, at least, so Mongoose is a little bit different. But when we create this new cat right here, that actually doesn't exist in our database until we save it. So we can continue to make changes to it, and then as soon as we decide that it's in a good place, that is when we can then save it and push it up. So until we use save, it's in memory in our application. And if for some reason that application were to crash before we save it, it does not exist. So if we wanted to insert some test data into our database, and by the way, this was originally set up where we will do it alongside each other. I just decided to scrap that because it's harder. But we'll just be going over the steps of if we were to use this in our application, and then we'll actually do it in class. So for step one, if we wanted to work with something like articles, we would insert some dummy data into our MongoDB in order to work with it. So in this case, we have 3 different articles. So as mentioned, just like Express, we require it into our app.js file, and then we will connect it to the string that is provided to us on Mongo Atlas. We then have the ability to listen to the connection. So we have Mongoose connection that is stored in a variable called db. And all we're wanting to do is, if there's an error, we want to console log that error so we know what happened. And on the first connection of opening, we'll just say that we've connected to mongodb, just so that way we know that it's connected. If for some reason we do not see connected to mongodb in our terminal, then we know that obviously something has happened. And then we'd be using nodemon, so if we were to make this save, we would restart it, and we would then see the console message in our terminal. So then comes building a mongoose schema, which a mongoose schema is the shape of what our model looks like. So there's two different things. There's a model and there's a schema, and they are different. So a model is, you can think of it as, it gives us all the ability to insert, update, read, and delete in our database, but the schema is what the shape of it looks like. So we can end up creating a schema object for an address, which could be used in multiple models. So we could say an address contains, like an address, or sorry, not an address, like a street address. It contains a phone number, postal code, all that sort of stuff that you would associate with an address. And then we could use that in numerous parts in our application. We could end up having a, let's think of something like Amazon. You would have a customer that would have multiple addresses associated to their account, both for shipping and billing. But then you might end up having a business account that also has addresses that are associated with it as well. Or if your application is big enough, you might end up having employees that are also in your database that are all doing different things, but all have an address that would be associated with them. So circling back, in order to work with articles that we just created in the previous slide, we would have to create a model for that article, which starts off as a schema. So we'll go over how to do that later. But basically, again, it's just defining what the JSON would look like in our database. So after doing that, Mongoose models have built-in CRUD methods, as mentioned earlier, that we can leverage rather than having to write our own. In order to use the article, like I said, we just get full CRUD. We would then implement it on the node side and then end up using like a form to post data to the server. And then on the server is where we would end up creating or updating data. And these are kind of like the different files that we'll be creating. We'll create like a create file, a list file, a details file in order to display data. So that is the last slide. There's not a whole lot to it, but if you want to refer back to it, it is on Blackboard under week 5 under weekly learning. So I'm sure that there are probably questions that people have and might not necessarily be wanting to ask, just because obviously you guys haven't learned a lot about Mongo yet. So if you want to open up your terminal and create a folder for this week's class, that'd be great. Just so that you know, I usually touch on this at the beginning of every class. Lab 3, as you guys know, was due yesterday, but you can always submit it after the day that it's due. You'll just lose 10% per day, and I will try to get it back to you as quickly as possible now that everyone has hopefully submitted it. So, but there will be no lab today. Next week we will be assigning our first assignment, which is going to be a portfolio site. I encourage you guys to actually, obviously you just want to get work done, and I know that you guys have other classes, but a portfolio is a really good way of being able to demonstrate your skills and kind of using it as a digital business card, where you can then give this to potential employers, either as a co-op or full-time. And if you do a really good job on it, I mean, I've built portfolios given them out, and that's how I got my first job, was by writing a pretty good portfolio in Node, because that's what the company themselves used. So they recognized that, hey, at least he doesn't know completely nothing about it, and that's how I got my first job. Cool story, I know. So just like last week, we're going to be using the Express generator, so that way we don't have to completely write our application from scratch. Let me boost up the font size. Is that good all the way at the back? Can you read that fine? If not, I can increase it a little bit more. That should be good. And also, I had a couple students last class who the Express generator was not working on their machine. I will try to help you out as much as I can, but there's only so much that I can obviously do in the 3 hours that we're here. I tried to work at least an hour after class trying to help this one student, and it just didn't work. So if it does not work on your machine, feel free to just follow along on here, and then once I push my code up to GitHub for the first commit, just download the project and try to continue from there. The Express generator, because it is a globally installed module, sometimes it comes into permissions on our machine that just prevent it from working. So if we were to use the Express generator, I'm already in the folder that I want, so I'll just type in express dot and then use /view equals pug. I will just leave this up for a little bit for those of you that copy it down. I also recognize that sometimes I'm a little fast at stuff that I go through. So if you feel like I'm going too fast, just put up your hand, ask me to slow down. Obviously, well, I would certainly hope that I know what I'm doing up here. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I run into an issue. But if you feel like I'm going too fast, like I don't know what level you guys are at. Some of us learn a little bit quicker than others. Some of us a little bit slower. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if you just don't know, if you're falling behind, just let me know. Or if you don't feel obviously comfortable bringing it up in class in front of everyone, just shoot me an email. I'll try to slow it down for you for next class. And of course, as always, our classes will be available on YouTube for you to review at your own pace as well. So as mentioned last week, and I'll just go over it this week, Express Generator will create a bunch of folders and files for us. The most important ones will be our routes folder and files, and our views folder and files, and lastly, our app.js. Everything else is pretty much already handled, and we don't have to worry about it. We're not going to be doing really any custom style sheets, images, or front-end JavaScript. We're just going to be doing mostly the back-end code. Yesterday, I decided not to implement Bootstrap into our application, which I think was really a mistake because it looked awful. So today we'll just take like a quick 5 minutes just to implement Bootstrap into it, so at least we can use some of their styling for our form that we will be doing. Because somehow someone decided that inputs should look awful if you don't style them. I don't know who decided that. Let me increase the font size. So we'll use 20 and 20. So I will also throw my terminal down here, so if I end up putting any commands that I'm running, like an npm install or something, I will throw that down here so that you can see it, but I will be running my application in nodemon in an external terminal, so that way we don't usually don't see it. Actually, I might just use tabs. I'll just use tabs. Okay, so every project that we start off with, I'm going to npm install /save dev nodemon. And again, nodemon watches our files. When it changes, restarts node. That's the quick summary. So npm space install /save dev nodemon. While that installs, inside of package.json, under our scripts, we are going to create a new script called dev, which will run nodemon. You can just copy the line that's above and just replace node with nodemon. Oh, I made a change and then it updated, and now I have to redo that. Okay.
Can you please show that code? The npm install will say.
This one?
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Chris,
Yes.
I install it without writing save develop node1. So
You can do it without saying /save dev.
Yeah.
That will just install it into your folder. Certain versions, and I can't remember when they changed it and if it even is still valid, but sometimes you don't have to do --save for it to modify your package file. At one time, you always had to do /save. Otherwise, it would just install it and you could play around with it, but it would not make it a dependency of your application unless otherwise specified.
okay.
So you can install it, but if you were to, so in this case, I'll just quickly show you this just as a learning thing. If I remove nodemon as a dependency of my application, so I'll just remove it, and I will also remove my entire node modules folder. So that doesn't exist anymore. Now, this would be as if I just downloaded my application from GitHub. So I don't have any node modules. I type in npm install because I want to install all the dependencies of my application. So it does its thing, and I go npm run dev. Oh, that's not a good example. I have nodemon installed globally. Is nodemon installed in here? Sometimes certain packages will also include it. Nope, it's not in here. So let me uninstall it globally. Okay. So I run it again. I run npm nodemon or npm run dev, and I get this error saying nodemon is not found. And that's because my project did not know to download it to my machine as a development dependency. So I just always encourage you to do it if you're using it in your application. npm install with the proper flag. Installing globally is not always the proper way to do it because sometimes you use different versions between different applications. So I'll just npm install that globally again, and npm install --save dev nodemon. Okay. So the next thing that we always do, and this is right after I do this, I'm going to be committing it onto GitHub. So if you are waiting for me to do that, don't worry, we're about to get to that. After we create our new project, we also want to create a git ignore file. So that way we can ignore our node modules folder so as not to push it up online. After doing that, I'm just going to do git init. You're welcome. So who here is maybe not, and be honest, is not as comfortable using Git or GitHub? I mean, that's pretty good. I mean, like I had one handshake. So if you want, just feel free to commit this yourself onto GitHub is probably a good thing. And also, you don't always have to use GitHub. It's just kind of my go-to. So I will git init everything, git add everything, commit init. And then I just need to create a project on GitHub. I should probably make it so that I can use GitHub from the terminal, but it's probably too much. So comp, this is 2068, right? I believe so. 2068, week 5, or I think I go summer first. Summer 2019, week 5. Tuesday. Oh, there we go. Tuesday, create the repository, and then I just copy this right here into my terminal. Okay. So now when I refresh, my code is up there. I will put this onto Blackboard as a link for those of you where this is not working. So weekly learning, week 5, web link, GitHub code, submit, and I'll throw it at the top. Okay. So it's under week 5 for those of you that need it. I will also, I'm just going to create a README file. I did this last week, but this will just outline the different commands that we just ran in our application. So if you want to look back at this later and know which commands we used, it's probably not a bad idea. So I used express --view equals pug, then npm install --save dev nodemon. I created a git ignore file and put node modules inside git ignore, git init, git add dot, git commit m init, git remote add. Actually, I think, is it still on? Nope. Git remote add and git push u origin master. So that's it. That's everything that we've done right now. The only other thing that we'll need is npm install --save mongoose, which is what we will type into our terminal right now. So npm install --save mongoose. Command is right here if you don't see it in my terminal. But again, mongoose is what is going to allow us to connect to our MongoDB that we will create. So I think first what we should probably do is we'll go into our Mongo Atlas account and start setting that up. Is anyone still trying to copy what is on the projector right now? Yes? Okay. I'll just leave it for a couple of minutes. I'll also push up this README file so that way you can just use it if you want it on your machine. Okay. Okay. So if we open up our browser and go to Mongo Atlas, and hopefully you're still signed in. I have to sign in myself. Sure. So I've already created a cluster. You will probably already have a created cluster that will be called cluster 0. Does anyone, if you're in your dashboard, do you see anything that's called cluster 0? Couple yeses, couple no's. Do you not have a cluster?
I do.
Sorry?
I just changed it.
Oh, you changed the name. Oh, okay. You're welcome to change the name. It doesn't have to be called cluster 0. But you should already have one that's right here, and it should have a little label that says sandbox. Does anyone not have that? Please put up your hand.
I don't have Mongo.
You don't have Mongo?
No.
The Mongo Atlas?
No. Wait.
Do you want to sign up? It's under, so at the beginning of class, under weekly learning. So weekly learning, there is a link under week 5 called Mongo Atlas, and you can just sign up for an account. It's 100% free. You can sign up with your school email because I don't usually, like, who checks their school email? So if they send you anything, you can just ignore it. So the free tier is pretty limited, but we're obviously not going to be doing in this class that's too extreme. So it's going to be fine for all cases that we're going to be doing in class here. So there's a couple things. I've already set it up on my machine, and it actually takes surprisingly a long time to delete a cluster in MongoDB. So I'm not going to delete it. But if you end up clicking connect, it will give you a modal pop-up that is going to be asking you like a couple things. It'll ask you for it's going to ask you if you want to whitelist an IP address as the first step. I just put in 0.0.0.0, which allows you to connect from anywhere. You can also click the button that says add my IP address, but that will only work if you try to run this at home. Unless if you add your IP address to the whitelist, it will not allow you to connect. So that might be your first issue of going like, I can't connect. This is just for learning purposes. This is not a security class. So you can just add 0.0.0.0 to your connection security. If not, I'm going to see if I can figure this. I think it's probably under network access, which would make sense. And you can add an IP address. So as I said, there is an option saying add current IP address, or you could just type in whatever you want. In this case, I'll just say everyone. And what's nice is you can also add it as a temporary whitelist. So you can say in this class, so I'm just going to delete this right now and add in 0.0.0.0 everyone. And I'm going to add this as a temporary thing for just 6 hours. I don't want people to access this come tomorrow, so that way I can like secure my database. But usually what is best practice, if you're trying to whitelist everything for testing, just do it temporarily. So that will allow it so that everyone can connect. And then the second part is we have to create a database username and password so that way we can connect as well. And same thing as network, we can create a temporary user. So I'm going to delete this user that's right here. And I'm going to create a new user. I'm just going to call it test. And the password is going to be test123. And they do not have to be a Atlas admin. This will probably give them the ability to create new clusters and stuff like that. What we really just need is read and write to any database. That's all we need. And I'm going to add that as a temporary user as well for 6 hours. Again, I don't want to just leave, because my GitHub repository is going to be open source so you guys can see it, and I don't want someone to just, take my credentials online and start messing around with it. So I'm just going to put it to 6 hours. So add that user. And now I can end up connecting to my database inside of our Node application. And in order to do that, the last thing that we do after we've set up our database access and network access is click connect. And we click, so there's 3 options. We want to connect our application. It will default to Node.js and version 3.0 or later, which is what we are going to be using. And the only thing that we need is this connection string. This is what we're going to be using to connect to our database. And you can see right here it says replace password with the password for your test user. Obviously, they're not just going to inject your password into the string that they give you. And you also have to replace the greater than or less than symbol. Don't just replace the word password. So in order to actually use this, if we go into our lab, or sorry, not lab, into our in-class work. And just below Morgan, I'm going to create a variable called mongoose, and that is going to require in mongoose. So require in mongoose for connection to mongoddb. And then we're going to say there's 2 parts to this. So unfortunately, there is an annoying thing that we have to type every time that we do mongoose connection or mongoose connect, where it wants us to give an additional option called use new URL param. I think it's something like that. And the reason for this is because mongoose is going to be changing as it goes forward. So it is using by default, it's using a deprecated way of connecting to MongoDB. In the future, they're going to be getting rid of that, which is why we have to specify that in our code. So we just type in mongoose.connect, and that's just going to be a string value. And then I'm going to give it an option of an object right after, and that will say use new URL parser true. So this is the part where now we can take the string that is in our Mongo account, and we can just copy it and paste it into our string right here. And then I'm just going to replace the password with test123. Now there's only two other things that we have to type in to make sure that we, to double check that we're connected. If we were to run this right now, it would make a connection to our database, but as shown in the slides before, we can also do a console log on that first connection. So I'm going to do vardb equals mongoose.connection. And let me just shrink this. And we'll say db.on error. And that will have a error that we console.error and db.once. And I think it's open. Console.log connection to mongoose successful. So again, just for explanation, we're taking our connection to mongoose and we're just listening to events. It's probably a little bit similar to in your first JavaScript class where you would create an event listener on, say, like a button, and you want to say every single time that this button is clicked, we want to do this action. That's exactly what we're doing right here. I'm sorry, all these pop-ups keep popping up. Go away. Okay. So if there's an error that ends up happening as a part of our connection, we just want to console log that using console.error. And then on the first opening to our mongoose connection, we just want to console log saying that it was successful. So this is just listening to events. And if we were to run this right now, I type in npm run dev. You should get connection to mongoose successful. If for some reason you are getting an error about like an authentication error, please make sure that your username and password is set up correctly. If you are 100% positive, make sure that your whitelisting was set up correctly. Otherwise, you might have a couple things. You might not have copied the string correctly. Also make sure that you're using the new URL parser. There's a couple different things that can cause it, but yep.
What's the command? npm?
I ran npm run dev. And that will only work if you have made the modification to your package.json file for that dev using nodemon. So who here is getting an error connecting to mongoose? Okay, that's pretty good. About 50 of us either managed to connect or just didn't want to put their hand up. So, oh, this is about the same time that it happened last night. Okay, so we'll just take, let's say, a 15-minute break for those of you that managed to get it working on the first try. You're more than welcome to go grab a coffee. I don't think anything's open at this point, but you can try to get a coffee. And for those of you that are having issues, I'll try to walk around, quickly fix it. A lot of them will probably just be really small things. So if you want to be back here, I'll say actually 20 minutes. Be back here at 10 after 7 if you need to go. I can only run around so quickly. So if there is anyone that is actually like pretty good at this stuff and for some reason is in this class, if you want to just try to help out, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought I saw you with your hand. Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So first of all, it says not find cookie parser.
Okay.
No, I crashed.
Well, you can just get the output.
Yeah,
You Yes, you should do it after not before. Otherwise, it doesn't know what to install. Oh, there's something else that we do. Oh, that's the deprecation. When you're saying use mongo client, it's use new URL parser true.
Oh.
Anyone else here has having issues?
I have the same problem.
You have the same problem? So just, you probably did not npm install after using Express. Just run that without anything else. Okay.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Sorry? You were using a single arrow there. It's supposed to be an equal symbol, not a dash. Right here. So you see how you're using dash and then it's an equal symbol. Yeah, so then that takes
Yeah, that's fine.
So just type it in.
Yeah, just grab it.
You should always install it. Yeah, after you run Express.
Wait, right?
You should install it right now.
I mean,
It does
that's
say that.
definitely not the price of sound, but
So now you can run
you know, it's better than
So did you install all this?
the best way of getting the sound is it's not from the drum but just ask the laser the sound edges. You just ask it to can I customize it as an event guest. So I'm adding the pickles and diamonds to the separate.
Yeah, we didn't solve them.
But sometimes they
Oh, you're still, oh, okay.
they put too much and like it's just that which is not good. So you can just find out. Have you seen the gaming thing?
They're actually just
Check your
Oh, you know what I think I did?
yeah, it's not fun.
I kind of want to go there, but
You all,
Friday.
Yo, Vlad, if you fill it up, make sure you put Rocket League down.
Huh?
Put Rocket League down if you fill it up.
I didn't put it off.
No, you gotta put Rocket League.
No, I did not. I feel it like one week ago. I have all the roles except Rocket League.
Island.
I did see it when I passed over it because it's a gamer.
Did I try to jump in
you
the
go to mongo and go to data.
So I played some. Like I played Portal 1 and 2.
Portal 1 is great. Second one.
Yeah, played both. Yeah.
You know they did co-op.
Oh yeah, yeah, played both as well. Yeah, but Shameless after I finished the main story. I was working at camp and the guy that was working was also so it was kind of funny. I had my back and forth with Steve Blunt and yeah, it's like a few stuff that's just one different and it's still like really violent.
I mean, it's not about the law, but it's about the violent story.
Die, fall in acid and stuff.
And when I will just reset the password.
Oh, yeah, I got you.
Yeah, so that kind of gaming.
So music for you is like a hobby?
Yes.
So
It's seriously for years about how to make good job.
so that's when you change that.
So
Try
it's a hard job.
Just cancel that job, go see.
But the effort to make one grader in music is harder to make a similar grader.
I mean, depends what kind of, I guess.
It looks like you need to.
I mean, there's plenty of things to do music. Soundtrack.
Try running it.
Sound effects.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually.
Yeah, run down with this
something.
Actually,
I find myself in like audio
it's not more than a German.
Where did you find yourself running a
You do?
soundtrack?
Did you work out today?
I did like chess and trying
It's the best, right?
It's like, you know, it's not something, you know, it's like ambient sound or that.
How long did you work out?
and see.
Like you're in 2 years now.
So
specifies.
I don't know, like 1 Jimmy, you know, so tired. Like constantly sore, but I don't know. But Jimmy goes to the school.
Sure.
I heard you guys do. How was it?
Yeah.
Yes.
I go to LA on the road.
Oh, there.
So now oh yeah? That's just a comment. That's confirm. And then you fire it again. Clusters. Tricks cloud. Connect to your application center. And then that is the string that you will use in your application. To this? Yes. Yes, Mongo Atlas is where our database is going to be. It's yes. Go to database access on the left side. And then click add new user. Yeah, I'll do that for you. So the username and password that I used was test and then test 1, 2, 3. So you'll see the same thing. So you can actually activate and on break. Go to network access. And then add IP address top right. Do you play games? 0.0. And then confirm. And then lastly, go to clusters on the left side. And you click connect. And then lastly, connect your application. The middle option. And that is the string that you will use in our application. So I will one second, I'll turn the picture. Okay. Is it capital K or lowercase? Okay. Let's go through that first. Not that much. Okay, so type in npm install. We already did that. Space, double dash save, and then space mongoddb. Yep. Zero. Yep. Just try, npm run that. Okay. So we got error email found. So I think that will be not set up with one list. So
Pretty good. We're alright. Feels like all our other classes we're kind of all building on each other.
Yeah. I think with the exception of this class,
Yeah.
we should try a new concept or a new language.
Yeah.
Which classes do you have?
C++ was the one actually I have.
Oh yeah, you said middles,
Yeah.
front row.
Yeah.
Swift.
Yeah, Swift. That's kind of cool. It's go back as in it's different.
Yeah. What else do you have?
JavaScript.
It should be fine. JavaScript class. It's like constant keywords for a company.
There we go. Like Stephen Keats, right?
Yeah, I don't know if I guess I could just check my box. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so he runs his own business, but he also works with
That's the user that you created?
Yeah.
I knew he had his own business, but I didn't know he had.
So you should do that.
Weird.
NPM rundown.
Yeah, I took that class in winter of 2018.
Oh, good. Oh, you know, it's great. Nice, yeah, he's pretty cool.
And he's like, I love him as a person, he has an educator, which is a rare combination.
Yeah, he seems really passionate too about the industry.
Yeah, he cares about industry, he cares about technology, he cares about the people as well, which is,
Yeah.
and especially as a coach of education, right? You gotta learn how to work with people.
My project teacher.
So that's where I put in mongoose.
Yeah.
Mongoose.
I can explain it like that. Every time.
No problem.
You look at this presentation, go to the next slide, it says 1 minute to read. And then he explains it like, he doesn't explain.
Oh, cool. 5 minutes to spare. Okay. Is there anyone that is not connected that still needs some help getting connected to Mongoose? I think I got everyone, so that went a lot smoother than last class.
Well, I took it
Yes, I remember when you with your
Yes.
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 Yeah, it was great. Wow.
My favorite.
Oh, really?
So just so everyone knows, I'm just waiting like 4 more minutes just because I said that we'd start at 10 after. So
Oh, yeah, that's it.
It's like the name of the project, my little program.
Yeah, so I was doing a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Silent Strike for optional. Honestly, up until September last year. So I came back here for fall. I'll go back down there eventually.
So while we're waiting, would anyone like to see, now just I would like to preface this, this is not an example of what I expect your assignment 1 to look like, but would anyone like to see like an example of kind of similar what assignment 1 should be? Again, I don't expect it to be as pretty. Give me 1 second. So I'd like to start this off by saying that this is not an actual assignment. This is a website that I've been creating for the company that I work at right now. That's just our company website. But will be very similar to what we will be doing in class. So for a portfolio, usually there's some stuff that we do. There's stuff like a contact form, so that way we can get in touch with the person that created it. We will have services that we offer, maybe some expertise that we also offer. But in here, we also, some people had put in GitHub projects that they had worked on like previous work, or maybe they put companies that they worked at. You can kind of think of this as like a digital version of a resume. So in this case, we have a work tab. This is like previous stuff that we've done at the company, and you can go in and see individual stuff about a specific project. So you can go in, read some information. This is just placeholder stuff. If you guys want to use placeholder images, I'm totally okay with that. You don't even have to use images. But obviously, the more that you do, the better. So this is just one page. You can go to like a different one. We did Elvis Yourselvis. Yeah. So Vlad, actually, for those of you that don't know, actually co-opted at the company that I work at in Collingwood. He was there for 4 months doing game development and doing some. I'll show them VR House. Okay. So there's no actual photos of it. This is just, there is a YouTube video. I guess I could go to this website. So we created a website for it, obviously getting off topic. But, so outside of that, why does that look so weird? Okay. And then we have like an About Us section. In this case, it has like our vision, our mission statement, employees that are there. We have some latest coverage. And again, you can see that this is on every single page because it's just a part of the footer. And then lastly, if you scroll down, we have our specialties. You'll notice this kind of layout is pretty common on most like Bootstrap websites where you have like a 3-column thing that talks about your services. In this case, emerging technologies, digital engineering, and interactive experiences. We have another article right here, brands that we've worked with. And then lastly, again, the contact form. So this is very stylized. I do not expect your project to be as designed up as this. If you even just use the default Bootstrap theme that is provided in, the default Bootstrap default theme, you're more than welcome to. The other thing is for those of you that don't know, there is a website that's called Boot Swatch. That is free themes that allow you to just kind of like mix it up. It's still Bootstrap, but it just looks a little bit different. So you're welcome to also use this as well, or do any sort of custom styling that you want. But the main thing is that your portfolio site, there's kind of like 2 main things. It needs to be written completely in Node and using Pug and stuff, as well as it needs to be about you and your own work. So that's really it, as we're just a little bit past where we were. But this is kind of like an example, and again, an above and beyond example of something that could be one of your portfolios. At the end of the day, like I said, you could be giving this to a potential employer where they are going to be basically judging you in the same way that, you say don't judge a book by its cover. Everyone does, and people are going to look at your portfolio, and it will be a digital representation of who you are. So if you have spelling mistakes in your portfolio, you have maybe not exactly the best design skills, that's fine. Like some of you guys are probably never going to really do much design work ever, because not everyone likes to do it. But at the end of the day, like, you still have to be professional and be able to try to make something that looks professional. So with that, that's kind of just it. Just thought I'd show you guys. Mostly, it's fun to show off what you work on. I think it's great for you guys as students to know like what is capable. Like I've done, I'd say 99% of this website. I didn't do any of the designs, but I did everything else that, all the programming, the hosting, the everything about this. So, and I've actually, for those of you that don't know, I've actually only been out of Georgian for 2 years. So I graduated 2 years ago from here. So, and if you're curious, I'm also 24. So like, if anyone is like younger or older, like honestly, you guys can like do so much so quickly. When you're in college, you guys will be introduced to so many, well, you guys already know this, but you've been introduced to so many different technologies that you feel like you're only just grasping the surface, which is true. Once you get out of college and you guys end up getting some sort of employment, either software development, web development, design, who cares, you can really just start to launch your career from there. So I just wanted to let you guys know that, show you what is capable. This isn't meant to be a motivational speech, so I'm just gonna like end it there. So yeah, that's pretty much it. This is, again, what your project could end up looking like. And if you want help trying to, maybe you don't know what's out there, it is always a good idea to take examples from online. You could end up going to looking for either themes for websites or looking at other people's portfolios that are out there and try to take ideas for your own. So, awesome segue. Now let's do programming again. So right now, the only thing that we've done in our project is we've connected our mongoose to a mongodb instance, but we're not actually able to use anything of mongoose. We've just connected it. So the first thing that we do, or at least that I like to do, is I'm going to create a folder in the root of my project that is going to be called models. So this is going to be where all of the representation of what our data looks like is going to live in our application. And because, well, I've been dealing with articles a lot lately, and the slides, are obviously talking about articles, I'm going to create a file that is called article.js. So this comes into more best practices, but usually when we create a model, it is always singular. And the reason for that is that a model represents one piece of data at a time. So we end up saying, we want to search for an article. Or obviously we can end up searching for multiple articles, but a model boils down to just representing one thing of data. So you create your models folder, and you can create a file called article.js. And in order to use Mongoose, we're going to require in Mongoose, just like in our app.js. So const mongoose equals require mongoose. And then on the next line, we're going to create a variable called schema, which is just referencing mongoose.schema. You don't actually have to do this part. I always find it just makes it easier to write code, personally. And then, actually, I won't bother doing that. So I'm going to create a variable called article schema, which is going to be a new schema. And I also encourage you not to create it called article, which you will see in a second why we don't actually just call it article and why we call it article schema in a second. So as mentioned, a schema is just the representation of what our data is. Anyone want to yell out what would be involved in a article? We'll throw those fields into our article. So what does an article consist of, data-wise? Title, yeah. And how would that data usually be represented? Like what is a title?
Well, it's like a string.
Yep. Yep. So it's a string. Someone else shout out one.
Maybe data.
Sorry?
Data.
Like the date or
No, like I mean.
like the body or the content, right? Of the article, like what you're reading? Yeah. So we could call it body or content. I'm going to call it content, and that's also a string. Might be a lot of like characters, but it's still a string. A date. So this could be there's different things that we could use this date. We could either say that it'll be the date that it's posted, or it could just be like the date that it was created. In this case, it's just going to be called date. And it also is just date. So as you can see, this gets pretty easy. Something else that we could do that is a little bit different. An article is usually written by an author. Someone writes an article. But what if there's multiple people that end up working on the same article? Obviously, you have like copywriters, you have editors, you have all that sort of stuff. So in this case, we can actually just say that it's an array by using the square brackets and saying that it's an array of strings. Title, content, date. Because again, I just showed you what those articles on the site that I'm working on are, we're going to have what is called a hero image. So a hero image is that big image when you go to an article that's right at the top. For those of you that know like medium.com, that's like the layout that they have, big image at top, title, some other stuff, and then content. So I'm going to just say hero, and this is, because we're not actually going to be dealing with files in this case, I'm just going to say that it's a string, and I'll just use that as a URL that I'll steal from online. Title, content, date, authors, hero. I think that's pretty much it. If you were to do like actual other articles, sometimes you'll put in like tags so that way people could search those tags and find it online. But I think that's pretty much all we'll actually work with. So a schema can be as basic or as complex as you want. As you can see right here, we're only using we only have a key value pair of what it will be, or like the name of it, and what it is. But you can also go more complex. So in this case, I am going to say that a title is a type as a string, but it is also required. So I will never want an article that does not have a title. So now I've created the schema, but as I mentioned, a schema does not do anything by itself. It is just a representation of what data will look like. In order to actually start working with models, we will create a model. So in this case, I'm going to create a article, which is going to be a new mongoose.model. I think I'm doing that right. Hold on. I think I don't actually need the new keyword. Sorry. When you go from like different ORM systems to ODM, it's a little bit different. So if you don't know, obviously this is your first time doing it. You're just copying what I'm doing online. But if you don't know what you're doing, you can just go to mongoosejs.com. They have fantastic documentation because, as I said, Mongoose is like the go-to library that people use for NoSQL databases using mongoddb. So in this case, they've created a schema. They've modeled out their schema. And here, you can, as mentioned, you can have nested data. They have, you can also do default values. So you can always say the default of this is going to be today's date and time. But if we were to create a model, okay, so it's just mongoose.model, not new. So the first part is going to be the string, which is like what the name of our model is going to be. In this case, it's going to be called article. And this is so that way it knows where to insert the data in our MongoDB. And here's the other thing that's also great about using Mongoose. You don't actually have to create a table or a collection. This will just automatically handle it for you. You don't have to do that. And then the second attribute is our schema that we created before. So this is why I said not to call your schema article, because we're creating an article based off of a schema for the model. And then lastly, because we're going to be using this in other files, we do module.exports equals article. And this is so that way we can import that article model that we just created and use it in other files. So, oh, I am running. Okay. So you can see that NodeMon is still running. On the surface, I don't have any errors right now, so that's pretty good. But I will take right now to commit my code onto GitHub. So I will git add everything and say creation of article model / schema and install Mongoose. So if you need this, again, you can just go to GitHub and either look at what I did and copy paste it or just download it to your computer. So the application when you use Express comes with two routes, index and users. If you go to the users route, it'll just respond back saying respond with a resource. But we're going to create a new route that is going to be called articles.js. And this is going to have all of the logic where we are going to do full CRUD with our articles. So if you look at the users or index.js route, there are three similarities between the two files. Obviously, this part is pretty similar as well, but the main thing that is always duplicated between them is we require an express, we create a router object, and then we export that router object. So those are the three things that we will copy into articles.js. Is import express, create a router, export that router. That's it, as of right now. So, and I probably shouldn't have deleted it because we're just going to write it anyway. But what we need to do is I need to actually have some sort of data inside my database so that I know that stuff is working. Because right now, if I were to try to search for articles, there are no articles. There's nothing to search. So it's going to come back with nothing so that I don't know if it's working or not. But what I'll do is I'm going to create a router.get on just slash, and that has our request and response object. And I'm going to say res.send working. So it's always a good idea, like I'm sure that you guys have seen from class to class and technology to technology, that the first thing that you usually do is like hello world. I mean, it's typically what you do in every single programming language, and there was a little snicker at hello world. But honestly, like doing something that's predictable that you know how to do in almost any language is always a good base, because the reason for it is when you start working with something that is drastically new than what you're familiar with, you can still try to figure out how to do the basic version of that. What little amount of code can I do to make sure that something is working? So in this case, I just want to make sure that if I end up hitting the articles route, that it will send something back to me. In this case, just working. But if you open up the app.js file, the majority of this you can ignore. we want to import the route that we just created, just like our index and users. So I'm going to import articles, and I'm going to call it articles router. And if you have your terminal open, you can still make sure that you're not getting any errors. So I will bring this down here just so that it's easier to see. And I want app.use to also use that articles router at /articles. So this means that whenever anything uses /articles, it will automatically be handled inside of my articles router that I created before. Whoops. Handled by my articles router. So good news is that when I save, I still don't have any errors. But if I were to open up the application, and I'll go back to it in a second for those of you that are still copying down, I can go to /articles and I get the string working sent to my browser. So that's a good sign. That means that everything is already connected up right now, and all I need is to start populating that data. It's always a good idea, like I mentioned, when creating a new file, try to do the bare bones to make sure that you have imported it correctly. So the only two things, again, that we need to do in our app.js file is we need to require in our routes articles file and then use it at /articles. And I will also commit and push that onto GitHub. So set up articles route add into app.js. Okay. Who thinks that we can go through full CRUD in an hour and a half? Okay, one person. I did it yesterday, so let's hope that we can do it today. Although, I'll be honest, like at the end of my class yesterday, I had like 6 people because everyone else just left. So like, I have like a full audience today. This is crazy. So, under articles.js, I'm just going to put in some data into my articles. So if I require in articles, which is located back in models, models/article. Oh, I'm sorry, I called it articles. It should just be called article. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const new article equals new article. And this had some values that were required. So we had a title with a string that's required. I'm going to be deleting this after. This is just to put data into my database for right now, so you don't have to copy this down. So I'm going to have a title, which is going to be called article title. I'll just copy this. So we had a content, which is article content, blah, blah, blah. Date, which is going to be date.now. A author, which is just going to be myself, and I'll also put in my wife's name because we did it together. And then the hero image, I'm just going to grab one from online. So there's a cool site that I use sometimes that's called Lorem Pixel that is great for placeholder images. So you can just figure out what size and width that you want it to be and create a color image. This is great. It's always good when you try to like show something and it doesn't work. Let me try that one more time. Color image. Are you serious? How isn't it look? I'm going to use a different site. There's a bunch of these. There's also, oh, this is actually the one that I used yesterday. So I'm going to grab this photo of a dog. I want it to be 1920 by 1080. It's a pretty big image. Actually, I'll like bump that down. I'll do like 1000 by 400. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so I'll take this image and inside of Visual Studio Code, that will be my hero image that I'm going to use. So now, as mentioned, I am creating an article that is only in memory. If I wanted to actually save this, then I also have to use the save thing. So if I say new article dot save, that will have a callback function, and then I will wait to send back until it's saved. So if you want to see it working, if you are using it on your machine, or you can just follow along up here, you'll see that if I go to collections, we actually haven't created a collection. Example, change name. Sorry? Yes. Are people using my database? I think so. Thanks, guys. I'm sure that's been your whole plan this entire time. So it's just new article.save as a function. It has a callback function that just sends res.set working. So,
Because they just clone your
gotcha. You guys have my passwords. Now I have to change it from my super secure test123. So every time that I refresh this, it will create a new article. So I'm just refreshing it a bunch. And if I click reset? Oh, I think that will clear everything out. Maybe not do that. Okay. It still says 1 to 3. What's going on? $304. Sorry. Refresh. Okay, so it looks like we're already getting an error, which is actually pretty good. So I'm just going to console log if there is an error. Sorry? Yep. Okay, so we're actually getting a validation error. Article validation failed. Cast date failed for value function now as... Okay, so it's not like that. Maybe if I just use like... I'm just going to say new date. That will probably work, actually. Refresh a couple times. And check now. There we go. Now we have some more data in there. So instead of using date.now, it's actually new date that we need to create. But now that I've created I have some data in there, I'm actually just going to get rid of this. But what I want to do is grab all of those articles that I just got there. So as mentioned, Mongoose comes with the full options of being able to do full CRUD. So if we type in article.find, this will find us every single article that matches the criteria that we give it. If we don't give it any criteria, it's just going to grab everything. And actually, I'm going to make this a little bit easier because I prefer using async. If you put the word async in front of your parentheses for your function, it turns it into what is called a async function. So there's a couple different ways that you can do asynchronous programming in JavaScript, which you guys have probably gone over before a little bit. There are promises that we went over in week 1. So a promise has 2 different things that it can do. It can either give you the result that you're looking for, or it will not give you the result that you're looking for. You can kind of think it like a promise. You can either keep it or break it, which in this case is called resolving and rejecting. So there's two different, but when we start working with async, it allows us to write promises in a way that looks very synchronous. So we can actually wait for a promise to finish before we start executing the next part of our application. So in this case, I'm going to say const articles equals await article.find. And that means that if I write code that's down here, like console log test, that console log test will not execute until article.find has finished. And it can either finish as in it resolves or rejects. There's no way that we know right now, but we'll just leave it like that for now. So then what I'll want to do is I'm just going to respond back in JSON format what those articles are. So that way we can just see it on the page. Then we'll actually like throw it into an actual view file. So find the articles, respond back with them. So if I save that and go to the website and bump up the font size just a little bit, I have an array of 8. So there are 8 articles that are inside my MongoDB right here. And as I go through them, you can see this one. Someone did a bunch of lorem ipsum text. Someone, probably same person, did lorem ipsum text, and the author is tree. Oh, hold on. I'm an idiot. This is all my stuff from yesterday. No one else is connected. It's me. I was wondering why that was there. I was like, that doesn't make sense. So here's my created data that I just did before. So now that I know that my endpoint is responding back properly, and who here has ever used, what is it called? Postman. Who here knows what Postman is or has used it before? Okay. Postman, great way of being able, obviously, to test that your API is working as expected. You can obviously do that if you want. I just prefer to use like a Chrome plugin that will format my JSON for me, because if I use like 2 separate tools, then I don't know, why do 2 different things if you can just do it all at one. But you can use Postman if you want. It's a pretty like industry used thing for testing your APIs. So if you want to do that to make sure that your article routes are working, then you can do so. Let's see. Yep.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure you're recording this.
Yes. Yep. Everything is recorded. Let me double check. Yes, my mic has been unmuted this entire time. I did that once. I recorded an entire class with the mic on mute, and that was kind of embarrassing. So I just re-recorded it at home. Right. So now what we need to do is we need to create a view in order to see the articles that we are grabbing from the database. So I'm going to create a folder because we're going to be doing full CRUD functionality. So I want to separate that out from the other parts of my site. So I'm going to create a folder, again, called articles. I apologize for all the different variations of article, either folder or files that we have. It can be a little bit much, but it really does help in order to organize your code. Because if you know where your code is, then obviously you can edit it, but when you have multiple files all open with similar names, it can get a little bit confusing. So I'm going to create a file that's called list.pug that is under my articles. So this is where we're going to list every single article that is in our application. Okay. So I'll just let you guys catch up. But while you're waiting, if you're already caught up, if you want to just copy the contents of index.pug into list.pug. So right here, index.pug, copy it into list.pug. And you can just change the H1 to saying all articles. And we'll have another like 10-minute break in about 20 minutes or so. I'm not going to do like a 15-minute break just because I gave you guys a little bit longer at the first one, just to make sure that we were all on the same page. So, but we should be able to get both of our pages for reading working correctly by that. So inside of our articles, we're no longer going to be using res.json because this just responds back with our articles in JSON format. I'm going to comment that out because I don't want to use it anymore, but I will leave it in there as an example for you guys. But what we want to do is res.render, which will render a file from our views folder. So because everything is done with relative pathing, I'm going to say that I want to render from the articles folder, and I want to render list. And I'm going to give it an object of our articles. So there's one thing that if you were to refresh this right now after rendering the list file, you'll see that we will get an error that says no such file or directory open. It can't find our layout.pug file is effectively what this is saying. It says it can't find layout.pug. And the reason for this is, as just mentioned previously, everything is done with relative pathing. So when you say in our list.pug file, in our list.pug file, we're saying extend from layout. Our layout does not exist in the articles folder. It exists in the folder just above that. So we can just use, we say that we use ... to meaning that we want to go back one directory. We do a /, and that's where we want to extend from our layout file. And the same thing works in reverse. If for some reason you have a layout file that's in a folder, you can go into that folder and then extend from it. So this is good. We have our all articles, H1 that we put in before. So right now, I'm going to just try to log all of our JSON that we have right now. So if I just did a paragraph tag, and this is going to be articles.toString. This is all of our data that's coming back from the database. So there's obviously a lot that's right here. But that's fine. We can sort it after the fact. So in order to iterate over data in Pug, we use the each. So we can say each article in articles. And this will iterate over every single article that we have. So I'm going to create an anchor tag with a href. And we'll also do the article.title. So I'll just get rid of that. So, and we'll go over what goes in this href in just a second. So again, it's each article in articles. We have an anchor tag. We have an equal symbol, meaning that right after this anchor tag, what's going to be inside of it is a variable. And that variable is article.title. So if I were to refresh this, I have all this. So I'm going to, actually, I'll just throw it in a UL. So UL, and each one is going to be in an LI, and this has to all be indented. So UL, next line, tab, each article in articles, next line, 3 tabs, LI, next line, 4 tabs, anchor with our stuff. Just so that way I can throw it onto each line. So right now, if we click on any of the links, none of them do anything because we haven't set up our href. So what we're going to do is, if we were to use the article title obviously, as you can see, there was 4 or 5 articles that all had the same title. So grabbing an article by its title is not useful. But as mentioned, every document that we create in MongoDB comes with a unique ID attribute. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say href is to /articles / and then I'm going to say it's article dot underscore ID. Please make sure that you do the underscore. If you use just ID, sometimes it doesn't work. In certain places it yells at you, other places it does. So who knows? It's one of those things that, like, when I run into it, I just go, oh, I forgot the underscore. I don't actually care enough why it works or doesn't work sometimes. So now if I actually click this, we get a link up here that is different than if we click this one, and so on and so forth. We're getting a 404 because we obviously have not set up the page yet to render that specific article, but this is a good start so far. So what I will next do is, because I just set up the link to go to that articles page, I will set up the route to render that page. So there's 2 things. We'll need to create I'm going to create a file under articles called details.pug, and this will be for a specific article. And I just closed it. I'm not working in it right now because I'm actually going to work in the Node side. So when I'm working in Node, I usually find that especially when I'm creating a brand new project and working in both routes and views, and sometimes I have partial files and all those mix-ins and stuff, I find that it's way easier to just work at one thing that I'm doing at a time and close the remaining amount of files. So that way you don't necessarily get confused. So I'm just going to close all my files. And right now I will commit that to GitHub. Creation of details articles. So under routes and articles, this is, again, where all of our data for articles is going to lie. So any of our server logic that's dealing with an article. So if I wanted to set up a route for a specific article, I will say article.get / and then to use a parameter in the URL, we end up using the colon. And I think I went over this last class or the class before that with you. So we say that we want to grab the ID that's in the URL, and this is also going to be an async function with request response, and that's it. So to make your lives easier, we will say we're going to grab the request params.id so that we don't always have to type request.params.id, stored in a variable called ID. Then we will say const article equals await, because again we want to await for this promise to finish. We say article dot, and the reason what's really nice with working with IDs in Mongoose is it gives us a lot of functions that specify an ID. So we can find by ID, and you can see my editor is also giving me some other ones. There's find by ID and delete, find by ID and remove, and find by ID and update. We're just using find by ID, and we'll give it the ID that we just created before. Then, after we have found our article, we are going to say res.render, and we want to render our article / details page, and we want to give it that article that we just found. Now, just like before, I don't actually know fully if this is going to work. If I just started working on my details page, there might actually be error logic that's handling in this route that doesn't actually work, and the error might not be in my front-end logic, is actually in the server. So just like before, I'm going to res.json and send back the article that I just did. So I'll just comment that out. just to make sure that it's working. So if I click on an article, article.title, that's good. We got some data back. If I go to this one, we have some data, which is good. And so presumably it's working. There will be an error if you end up going to an ID that does not exist, but I don't care. We can handle that in another class, which is, we're going to be going over this tomorrow, or sorry, not tomorrow, next week. So for this week and next week, we're going to be going over CRUD with Mongo. So if it's not clicking today, the first time you're seeing it, we can go over this again next week, don't worry. So now that we are using or rendering our details page, we should probably put some stuff into it. So I'm going to copy from my list page and just delete everything. So this will be the last thing that we do just before we go on another 10-minute break. So we have our details.pug file. We have our block content and a h1. And that h1 is going to house our article.title. On the next line, I'm also going to do article.authors.join with a comma. So the reason for this, again, this is just valid JavaScript that I'm executing in the details.pug file, but the article that we're passing to it is a JavaScript object. Authors is assumed that it's going to be an array that is coming back. And an array has the ability to use .join for the several values, and we just join it with a comma between it, so that way we can have a comma separated authors listing on our page. So if I go to one of these, for right now, let's see. Oh, failed to look up article details. Oh, sorry, spelling mistake. The string right here should say articles details and not article singular. So just make sure if you got that error that you caught it on your machine as well. So if I refresh it, we have example changed name by Chris Naismith. I assume that's what it's called. Yep. We also have CRUD test 1 by me. We have a thing called trees by trees. And then we have article title by myself and my wife. So to put in some more content, I'm just going to use a paragraph tag, and that'll be article.content. And I'll also throw in the date that we put in as well. So article.date. So we have an h6 with article.date, our authors. We have a paragraph tag with our content. And lastly, the only other thing that we need to put in is our hero image. So I'm going to use a image where its source attribute is going to be article.hero. And I am going to throw some styling on it just so that it doesn't look as dumb. So I'm going to say its width is going to be 100%. It's going to have a max height of, let's say, 400 pixels. And it's going to have a attribute of object fit of cover. So if I refresh this, I was just showing it. I'll go back 1 sec. So this is what it will look like when it renders out. You don't actually have to do the style tag. I just did it so it goes full width. So that way it just looks a little bit prettier. The other thing that we can also put in, which will just be a static link, is the ability to go back to the all listings or all articles page that we created. So I'm just going to do an anchor tag that goes to /articles, and I'll just say go back. That's it. I will also apologize for this class going the full duration. I know probably some of you are tired and just want to go home.
Chris, have you do the rest.json?
Like this thing?
Yeah. Interesting.
What's going on?
Yeah, mine is saying that it can't perform join on undefined. I suppose something with the data output in the server.
I'm getting 404.
You'll get a 404 if you haven't set up the link correctly in your router. I'll just be one. I'll just show you. 1 second.
Yeah. The link slash. Yes.
Yeah, go to app.js. Oh, you got it. You got it. So that's why slash is.
So I just use this as 10.
Yes, so you need both. Yeah. So the top one is for rendering all of the articles. The second one is for rendering a specific article. Yes.
Oh yes, it's undefined.
And
Must be calling it wrong.
okay, that's me.
Here's one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad that you created an article with a hero image of yourself.
And the first image I had was
It's the first image.
I mean, it was popped up. It's not like true. But is it okay that I had like 5 different five exact same articles?
Well, they're not the same, are they? Like, I mean, they're not the same because they have a different ID. So, okay. So, it's 8 o'clock. Let's go for a 10-minute break. Be back here at 10 after 8. And then we can do the last 3 parts of our application, which will be creating, updating, and deleting of our articles.
Yeah, you can see it. So I started. Where's
1 second.
it's just realizing. Yeah. Because like when you type, I'm type 2, I'm like, you know,
The only reason why I'm doing fast is we have 15 minutes of class left, and I still have to go for updating, deleting, and creating. Yeah.
there are a lot of stuff.
Yeah, because we're going to be going over this all again next week. I'm expecting it not to all sit out on the first try. I will try to go as slow as possible. It's just if I am typing slower and then people are still copying it down, like I'd like to type fast, wait and let people copy it down. But when I'm switching just to show, like I am a very like feedback person. So when I program, I don't program like hundreds of lines of code. I usually program like 3-4 lines of code and then immediately test it. I'm like, all right, let's still go, keep going. So I like to like show that we just throw in this anchor tag and it just is immediately there, or the image is there.
That's before,
Yes.
like whenever you perform the next step, can you first don't write anything, like you briefly describe what you're about to do?
Yeah.
Yeah, because like when you type in end, you know, kind of want to type with you synchronically, but I can't really hear you at the same time.
Can we do that?
For the next class, can you just take 5 or 10 minutes, quickly go over what you wrote here and just review what you did?
Oh, like take the code that we wrote today, next week, and
Yeah.
then just like do a brief recap over it?
Yeah, like what this line does, what this line does.
Yeah.
There is a lot of different options, like.
Yeah, yeah. I might even end up doing like where we comment
Yeah.
out everything
I
that
got
we're
it
going
working.
to do in
It
that
was right, it
program
was something
first.
to do with my
I'll try to do that,
routes.
and then we can start doing that.
Just if it's not breaks, so you can.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is only, like, technically this would be the third time that I taught this exact stuff. So, like, I mean, I'm still trying to get it better. Now, when I took this class, that the professor was very quick. But there's also a lot that ends up getting covered in this class. I think it's maybe the busiest class of any of the programming classes. So. I might be a little bit biased because like I came into the program with prior programming experience. So like when we did like any of the Java classes, I was like, this is like, whereas other people struggled. Whereas when I took this class and I was like a programmer, like who had been programming for several years, I still struggle with this class. So
There's a lot of stuff in the node ecosystem too, right? With all different technologies.
it's so much. Like it is constantly changing.
Yeah, true.
It is like, I'd say that it is the quickest moving ecosystem if you compare it to anything else programming wise. And like a lot of people joke about like, oh, like I built a framework and it's out of date. Like, because there is constantly something new that is coming out. Like if I were to, and that's why I showed you guys like NPM on the first couple days. It's like you can search something and there's like 7 different people who have already tried to solve it. So, and obviously this isn't related to, like it's related to class, but it's not related to what we're doing right this second. So one thing that I was trying to solve by myself before I thought of just like installing a module is I was trying to convert RGB into hex, but also because I was working with a stream of data that was constantly coming in binary. I would then convert that binary into hexadecimal, but then I also needed to do stuff with that hexadecimal, and each hexadecimal value needed to also have a color associated with it. So I had hexadecimal that was, you can think of like an array of arrays. So it was hexadecimal that each hexadecimal represented also a color in hexadecimal. So if I were to,
So the data coming wasn't all colored data, but
it was binary data of on-off. So it was on and off, but I needed to elsewhere know what, because it was a LED matrix.
Okay.
That I needed to know what color each LED matrix was. But because I was using buttons, I was listening to, actually, hold on. If I reopen that website that I showed you guys.
Is it Dream Trail?
Yes.
Okay.
So, what was it, D27? So, hold on. It'll be here, not this part. This part. I built that. All 100% in Node. So it was all in JavaScript. Everything from like physical hardware went into a module that's called nodejs, which is human interface device. So I was able to take input from physical buttons going into a Raspberry Pi, figure out what each button should be, and then output the color using WS2811 LED strips. A lot of work, but anyway. So when I went to NPM and I wanted to convert colors from, unfortunately what I needed to do is I like to store the values in hex on the server, but when I was sending values, I needed to use RGB. So I needed to know the RGB value so that way I could send it to the strand, but on the server I wanted to deal in hex because obviously it's easier. So I just typed in color, and you can see there's literally something exactly called color. And
all color is for is manipulating and dealing with colors. So I can create a new color that is based on this value, and I can change its alpha by 2.5 and lighten it by 2.5. I can convert it to HSL and then convert that to a string. You can also use CMYK, round, array. It is cyan, magenta, yellow, and I can't remember what the K is. But it's basically, so like RGB is on monitors. CMYK is usually the colors that you would see in printers. So that's why you would end up having like a blue cartridge, a purple cartridge, a yellow cartridge, and what is key is what it's called. So I'm wondering if maybe key is like black. But anyway, so that is what is used typically in printing processes. So anyway, when I was working with this, this module already 100% solved what I needed to do. I was able to give it a RGB value and convert that to hex. I was also able to give it a hex value and convert that to RGB. So an example would be, in this case, they're saying color.rgb and they give it the RGB values. But you can say .hex and it will give you the hex representation of it. You can say RGB number. So this is hexadecimal, as you know, instead of being like decimal with like 0 through 9 and being like 0 through F for 16. Sometimes people still want to represent hex values in decimal numbers. So this has the ability to convert a hex number into a decimal representation of that, which I also needed at certain parts of the application. So anyway, this entire library was fantastic at being able to handle everything that I could possibly need ever to deal with a color. So this is a perfect example of like why you should not always reinvent the wheel, because this probably has, I would say, like 99% of the use cases that you could possibly deal with color in JavaScript. There's also this one. This is totally different, still dealing with colors, but Chalk is a library that makes it really easy for outputting colored text in your terminal. So in this case, they use like background red, background green. They have a lot of like defaults. But in recent versions, and if you use a terminal that supports it, you can also use just regular hex values as well. So you can say background and hex or just hex. And that Chalk is actually what is used by, it's in my Visual Studio. Chalk is what NodeMon uses to output colors to the terminal. So
that's cool. I'm just trying to think of how it all connects.
I don't think there is a plugin for VS Code to show what kind of color you have.
to show what kind of color what?
You type in like
Yes, I have it. So if I type in, let's do, I'll just create like a new string. So const color equals RGB 255, 255, 255, and it's white. And RGB, if I remove the B, that will make it orange or yellow. And this will make it red.
is it supported like full RGB spectrum or not?
Well, that's that. So that's RGB. I could do FFF for white. I could do hex code. I can also use RGBA for alpha. So I could do 255, 255, 255, and then 0.5 for partial alpha transparency.
May I ask you a question? You can not answer it in English.
Yes.
Illumination.
Yes.
Did it pay off?
Hmm?
Did it pay off?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, like, so, hold on. Mute. Okay, so let's try to get the rest of this done. There's 2 more files that we have to create. We're going to, well, two files in our views. We're going to create a update file, and we're going to create a create file. So let's see. So we've done reading. We don't have updating or deleting. But the deleting, we're not going to set up a separate file in order to delete. We're just going to be handling deleting in the server. So I'm going to create 2 files. I'm going to create create.pug, and I will also create update.pug. I'm sure, as you guys know, oftentimes it's usually easiest if you just use one file for both creation and updating, so that you only have to build that UI once. I'm just going to copy paste it because it just makes my life easier. Because handling just the logic for the creating and updating just takes a little bit longer just to do it. So so let's handle creation right now. So if I go in and I say reader.get, and I want to say /create, but make sure when you put this, because this is important, do not put /create right below our ID parameter. Who wants to guess why? So if we use, because again, Express is first come, first serve, it will always, it's done priority ordering. If we type in /create, it is technically an ID, because we don't have any sort of, like, we don't know what an ID is going to look like. So it will actually hit this route first and try to find an article with the ID of create. So what we can do is just move that above. Oh, how did I just do that? I just duplicated a line. That was cool. But to make sure that we always hit the create route first, we'll just throw it above our ID. So for handling a form submission, it comes in through the body object of our request. So I'm just going to say const body equals request.body. So I'll just try to throw in some comments like I said. So first we'll grab submission from form. We will then create a new article based on submission. And then we will, so after we create it, then we want to redirect to the newly created article. So those are the 3 steps. Grab the submission, create the new article, redirect to that article. So in order to do that, we will say const new article equals new article. And we will give it the body object that came in. We will then, I guess we'll do one more thing. We'll save the new article. So we'll save it. We'll say const article equals await new article dot save. So again, because saving is asynchronous, we don't know how long it's going to take to upload that information to the database. We will await it and have our newly created article. So unlike our other routes where we are passing data that we've fetched from the database, what we're going to do is redirect based on the ID of the article. So in order to do that, we use res.redirect, and we say /articles/article._ID. So create the article, save it, redirect. As you can see, like, the majority of this stuff is like really handled for us. Like there's not a whole lot that we end up actually writing manually, which is really nice for using Mongoose. So I save that. And now we also have to set up the form for updating, or for creating. but I'm actually going to copy this as we already have this open, and we are going to set up the updating route at the same time, because it uses almost the exact same logic. So instead of using /create, we're going to want to know what the ID that we're updating is, so we're going to say /ID. But we're going to use a post. And we'll say /update, just because it makes it a little bit easier. And this /create also needs to be a post. Sorry about that, I said reader.get, but it needs to be a post. So the only difference between our updating and our creating is that we want to find and then update that object, which is exactly what it's called. So we're going to grab our ID from request.params.id. And instead of saying new article and save it and stuff like that, we can just get rid of it. And we do it all in one line. We end up saying article.find by ID and update. And we give it the ID and body. And then we can just say const article. And then we also redirect back to that article.
So we have create and ID and update, right?
Sorry?
We have the two functions, create and
Yep, we have create, and then we have the :ID /update. Oh, are you talking about, like, sorry, this one, find by ID and update? Is that what you were?
no, like, yeah, do you have like post /create and post /
Yes.
ID update,
Yes,
which are basically the same, but with some
just minor differences, yeah. So now we've handled our logic for creating, we've handled our logic for updating. The other thing that we need to do is just being able to render the page for the form for creating. So this is why I mentioned it's supposed to be reader.post, not reader.get. So this one is really basic. At /create, reqres, we say res.render articles /create. That's it. It can just be one line. Right here. So at reader.get /create, we want to res.render articles /create. Because that's all that page is going to do. It is just purely for rendering a article, the article creation form. And we can just save that. Okay. So in our create.pug, I actually said at the beginning of class that we were going to use Bootstrap, but I'm not going to bother wasting any time doing that again. So I'm going to have a H1 that just says create in article. And I want to make sure that it is rendering that. Should be here somewhere. Right here. So articles /create says create an article, so that means that we're loading the correct page. And I'm going to create a form, which is going to be of method is post. I'm going to put post in capitals. Method is post. And in order to create an article, we need just some basic stuff. We need a input that is going to have a name of title. And I'll put a placeholder as well that says title of article. What else did we put in that? Sorry, content, date, authors, and hero. So I'm going to have a name for the hero, which is the hero image URL. We'll have a date, which will be type date. We don't need a placeholder. And then we need 2 text areas. Well, I'll just use an input, actually. So input name equals authors. Placeholder equals authors. And one last one, which is the text area. Name equals, and this is content. Placeholder equals content of article. And then always a form needs a button of type submit. It says create article. So just curious, does anyone actually like using Pug versus actual HTML? Does anyone actually prefer Pug? A couple people, good. Who actually hates Pug? No one hates it. All right, that's good. That's +1 for Pug.
It's kind of all myself into like when I type in HTML, I just can't.
Yeah, I hate HTML. It's like, I don't know how someone decided to make the ugliest way of writing like anything.
It is XML. XML is fine.
XML is literally the same thing as HTML.
It's
It's literally the same thing.
It is literally the same thing, but
Yeah.
namings are just names like names. for
Well, like
names.
XML is just HTML, but there's no rules. You just call whatever you want. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like for Android, it's probably 100%.
Everything should be JSON. Everything, 100%.
What's that?
JSON.
Jason?
Yeah. Yeah, because like that was the whole reason why like JSON was created, is because like XML is bloated and ugly to read. So anyway, so we've created our create form, and I will, hopefully this works on the first try. Let's see. Title test, a hero image. I'm going to grab this image again. The date is going to be today. Authors is Chris. Content is lorem ipsum. And create the article. Fingers crossed it works on the first try. It worked! Look at that. It's always amazing when it just works on the first try. That's pretty awesome. So if I wanted to use a different image, let's say 233, go back, /create. What was that a photo of? Train tracks. And this one's written by Vlad. I love trains. Do you like trains, Vlad? No?
Yeah, okay. Kind of normal. Not like
All right.
trains and trains.
So, although we just set up our route for updating, what I'm first going to set up is the deletion of an article, just because that one's really quick to do. So inside of our articles.js, this is going to handle deletion, which is just going to be a GET request. For anyone that knows anything about minor security, this is an awful way to handle deletions. Do not do this. But for all testing purposes, this is fine. So it's going to be an async route. It has our ID, so we're going to say const ID equals request.params.id. We have our article that we want to delete. So in this case, we don't actually need to return anything from our deletion. I guess one thing that we could do is we could look at how many items were deleted, which is usually what is returned, but it doesn't return the objects that were deleted. So we just say article dot delete or find by ID, and I don't know what, yeah, there's delete and remove, and I feel like they do pretty much the same thing. Ah, here we go. So the difference is find and remove will delete it, but it also, I guess, returns it. So I'm just going to do find and delete because I don't care. Give it the ID, and then, sorry, there's a bug. Then I want to redirect to just the articles listing page. So once I delete it, I just want to redirect back to the total list of articles. So inside of our details page is where I'm going to put the delete link for deleting an article. Is anyone still copying this down? Should be good. Sorry, oh, there you go. So inside of our details page is where I will put a link of being able to delete the article, which is just going to go to /articles/ the ID and then /delete. So I'm going to throw it up top with the image up here. I'm going to create a div that has a couple styling attributes just so that there's separation. So I'm going to use display flex. I'll use justify content space between. That's all I need. And then I'll throw this anchor tag inside of it. And this is now where I need to, instead of using just the regular quotes, I'm going to use the backtick. So that way I can inject the ID of the article in there. So I use the $, opening, closing brace. I say article._ID/delete. So the div that I put up there for the display flex and justify content space between is just going to create me a div that goes full width and will evenly space out, putting stuff at the ends. So that div is completely optional if you don't want to put it in. So by refreshing, you can see I have the go back link that's right here on the left side, and on the right side is the delete. So if I go back, you can see here's my train tracks misspelled article by Vlad, and if I delete it, it's no longer there. So I can delete some of these other ones. I can delete that one, delete that one, delete that one, and delete that one. So automatically, it just tries to go to a page. That page goes, all right, we're going to delete that, and then redirect you back to the articles page. So it's fairly straightforward, but is there any questions about just how like the deleting part works or anything that we've covered thus far in class? Any questions? Okay. So the other thing that we also need is the ability to update an article, and this will be our last bit that we actually do. So we will create one last anchor tag that goes, we're still using the backticks, so /articles/article._ID/update. And that will just say update article. Oh, sorry. So unlike our creation page of an article, we don't need to grab any sort of data from the database for an article. However, when we're updating, we do need to grab that article so that way we can fill in the inputs of what is currently set in the database. Because obviously it wouldn't be that great if you went to update something and every single time you had to start from scratch. So that's what we're going to do. So we have our, right here, ID and update. I'm going to copy this. Actually, a good one to probably copy would be our, where is it? Our ID one, that's right here. So if you copy this and paste it with /update, the only other thing that you need to change is to /update. I think that's it. So this is the part of the night where we now just like copy paste the rest of our application to make it work. So we have our update.pug and we have our create.pug. So I'm just going to copy the form. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Sorry.
Just want to get bugs.
Yep. So creation of different routes / views. Okay. So, yep, no problem. So I'm going to copy my create.pug and I'm going to copy paste it into update. So I'm just going to say update. And in this case, I'm going to throw the article title in the top just so I can see it. So if I open this up, you can see that there's now in the middle is my update article. And this now says example change name. So in order to fill in our inputs, we need to use the value option. And this will be article.title. So sometimes it can be hard to know like what variables are you injecting into a form. What's easy with this is it'll just be article followed by whatever the name attribute is going to be right here. So we can just say value equals article.hero, value equals article.date, value equals article.authors. And the last one, because text areas for some reason decided to be different than an input, you actually end up having to put it at the end. A text area does not have a value attribute associated with it. So you just do article.content at the end. So that's an equal symbol followed by article.content. And I'm going to change create to saying update article. I'll just leave this up for a little bit just so you can copy it down. So again, I don't know if this is 100% working right now just because I haven't tested it. But just looking at it, this looks like everything is working as expected. Is it okay if I switch over, Vlad? Cool. I'm curious about, I'm not 100% positive that article.date will work just because dates in JavaScript and dates in HTML for some reason work totally different. But if I refresh, no, it did not work. Okay, so that's fine. So in here, I have the text of my thing, so I can just add in some extra text and say, Vlad made me do it. And update article. Ooh, did it work? I'm going to guess that it didn't work. What happened? Cast error, object ID failed for value undefined at path underscore ID for model article. Let's see. ID update.
Something to do with the date?
Let me see. Oh, no. It all of a sudden. No, it looks like it. I think it updated it. No. So let's see. I'm just going to submit it. Look at here. Yeah, date is a empty string. Okay, yeah, I think it's the date. So if I try that one more time, refresh, change the date to today's date and click update, still didn't work. Interesting.
Are you sending the ID as a parameter somehow?
Shouldn't be. Like the ID is in the title automatically because I'm just doing a post request to the same URL. So that should be working. Let me console log the ID though. But I see that it keeps going to undefined. So it's like it tries to update it, probably fails, and then doesn't know where to redirect to, which is actually where the error comes from. So I have today's date, I click update. And here's the ID. So we are doing it correct. Oh, okay, figured it out. Anyone know? Guess.
Are we sending it, are we trying to send it to articles and slash articles?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
The underscore?
Sorry?
Is it the underscore?
Nope. Underscore is always supposed to be there.
Okay. I don't know
We
that.
should redirect to list.
It's this part. So what does this return? It does return an article, but because we're making a network connection, we don't know how long it's going to be. It returns a promise. We have to wait for it to finish updating. So we have to use the await keyword. So here's an example of when you're using asynchronous code synchronously, but you sometimes do like a small issue. So what ended up happening is when we use article.findById and update, it returns the promise with the result of the article that was just updated. But if we are not awaiting it, it actually just returns, so const article will become a promise, and then underscore ID does not exist, which is why we got the thing of undefined. So underscore ID does not exist in the promise of article until we await it. So now, go back, example change name, update, and throw some stuff in, update. There we go. So that's what it was. So with that, so I'm just going to remove that. That is everything that's doing full CRUD of just one article or several articles that we managed to do everything. We managed to sign up to Mongo Labs today, or not Mongo Labs, sorry, Mongo Atlas. We managed to create a collection, create a model, connect our application to the database, and then do full CRUD and forms. So what we're going to do going forward is we're going to actually be taking the project that we worked on the previous week to start our project this week. So next week we're not actually going to use Express Generator. We're just going to take our current project so that we don't always have to keep setting it up to connect to like MLab or Mongo Atlas. So the only thing with that is next week, some of us, including myself, set up temporary networking and temporary users to our database. So next week, we will reset it up. Probably a good practice to constantly remember how to do that. But with that being said, that's the end of class with 6 minutes to spare. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
Can you please show me the button for like creation the list of buttons?
The bottom part of, sorry?
Like, can you open up the list of buttons?
Yes.
So we don't have the button to create stuff. I mean, like, you know.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll create a button to create a new article. So an anchor tag, href/articles/create, and create a new article. That's it. So I will push the last part of this up to GitHub, update article. While I am not assigning a lab this class, I do encourage you to maybe, I don't know, just like 30 minutes or so between this class and next class. Just try to re-go over this. Try to do this, create a different model. I don't know, you can do something that's kind of similar. You can maybe do like a forum post or any sort of thing that you want. Just so that way when you come in next week, you're not starting from scratch. So, and also the other thing is if you guys end up doing this in your free time and you start having issues with it, those are perfect questions to come to class with and be able to ask me because other people are going to run into the same problem as well. So, yeah. So I hope you guys have a good night, and I will see you guys next week.